Welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm Kathleen Walter. With us now on the phone is Representative Tim Huelskamp, Republican from Kansas. And Congressman Huelskamp, thanks so much for being with us again.
My pleasure.
The Senate last night passed comprehensive bipartisan immigration reform legislation. Several senators, including Mike Lee, Jeff Sessions, are predicting that this legislation is dead on arrival in the House. Is this legislation indeed dead on arrival in the House?
I sure hope so. And I had a meeting with Senator Lee and Senator Paul yesterday morning with some other House members and trying to figure out, okay, how do we stop this in the House? And as it stands now, our leadership will not be running this bill. They've also made a verbal commitment, both privately and publicly, that nothing will come to the House floor on immigration unless it has a strong majority vote in the Republican conference. There's a reason you elect a Republican majority is you want to do Republican things in the House. As it sits now, it'll be trust but verify, but this bill has not come to the floor of the House.
Right. So right now, there is no majority support for this.
There is not. And if you look at that and you would think, how would one design a bill that would guarantee no passage in the House? This would be the bill. And I am still convinced that the President of the United States does not want a solution. He doesn't want to solve this problem. He wants an election year issue for 2014. So we got the Senate Day Act. He got a bunch of Republicans to join on board to call it bipartisan so it could go over and start bludgeoning the House over the failure to give amnesty to millions of potential Democratic voters.
Speaker Boehner says that he won't bring up the Senate immigration bill for a vote without majority vote. How will you and other Republicans keep him to his word?
In the House, there's a procedure called adopting a rule that has to be adopted by a majority of the body before you can continue on to debate a bill. And I've been one of the few that's been willing to vote against these rules. And I'm committed that if a bill comes up that's anything close to this Senate bill, I will vote against the rule so it doesn't come up for a debate. But the real issue we've been talking about is what would happen in a conference committee, in which, say, this House, we went ahead and passed a true border security bill, just like we were promised in 1986, and they sent it to conference with the Senate, and the senators came over and says, we want our whole bill, and all the Democrats on the House side were on conference committee said, yes, we want the Senate bill. Would the Republicans be strong enough to say no? Well, yet today, or late yesterday, the Speaker says, Hastert rule applies to a conference committee report on immigration, that unless the majority of Republicans support the bill, it's not going to happen, which is a very positive sign. But again, it all comes down to those votes and whether or not folks keep their word over here in the House leadership.
Yeah, that's sort of my next question for you. Let's say the House passes these piecemeal immigration bills. Can you enter into formal negotiations with the Senate if the Senate bill ends up lacking majority support of House Republicans?
I think you can, but that gets very dangerous. And that's why hearing the Speaker say or reading about it in the paper this morning that no conference committee report on an immigration bill, anything like the Senate is good to see. But again, trust but verify and hold these folks to the fire. And I would guess, though, the Speaker would be very worried for his job if he suddenly said, you know what, we're just going to go ahead and do what Nancy Pelosi wants to do on immigration, and that would be a disaster. I still think it was a very bad decision by many of our senators to go down this path and provide this opportunity for the president to continue to decide what issues are going to be debated in Congress rather than being aggressive and proactive. Right now we're reacting to a president with his poll numbers falling and scandals everywhere, and they give him a huge victory in the Senate primarily with Republican help.
Do you think we'll actually see immigration legislation signed into law this year? And is the Republican Party's future threatened if there's a perception that they're blocking reform?
I think the Republican Party's future is threatened when they pass and vote for amnesty bills. And the flip side of this is there's consultant after consultant. Folks and pollsters in Washington, D.C. have been telling us for months since the election, years before, that, boy, if we would just create amnesty somehow, magically, folks would start voting for the Republican Party that haven't in the past. That didn't work for John McCain. It didn't work for Mitt Romney. And these are the same folks that ran these campaigns making that suggestion. So the flip side is, guys and gals, Republicans have to stand up and actually promote our pro-growth, pro-family agenda and talk about economic opportunity instead of saying, you know what, if you give amnesty, somehow 11 million new voters are going to pull the lever for Republicans. They have it backwards, but again, these are the same folks, in my opinion, that have had it backwards and have lost a multitude of elections with this same approach that, boy, if we could look a little bit more like the Democrats, magically people would would vote for us. That is not the case. It's not the case in the polling that they continue to get wrong again and again.
Let's switch gears real quickly. You made headlines this week after the Supreme Court ruled that the Defense of Marriage Act is unconstitutional. Can you update us on your plans to introduce the federal marriage amendment, which would define marriage as between one man and one woman? And is this more of a political statement, or do you really see this legislation going somewhere?
It is a big uphill climb. Our founders of the Constitution intended that way. A two-thirds vote of the House and Senate and three-fourths of the state. And today we have three-fourths of the states still define marriage as between one man and one woman, and I think we'll do well there. The question is in the House and Senate. And we could look back and say 10 years ago Republicans should have been pushing this, and 15 years ago it was Democrats were on board for the Defense of Marriage Act. So we've lost a lot of ground. It's going to take a long time, but I think when the American people wake up and actually look at this opinion and look at what's been done to their country, done to their institutions, I think they're very upset. And one thing that does get lost in this whole debate is this issue of marriage. It's the idea that somehow the desires of adults should trump the needs of children, and I disagree. I think our children should come first. Research is very clear, and that the best place to raise a child is with a mom and a dad, and marriage has been the least intrusive ways to promote stronger families and stronger children and a better society. So it's a difficult battle. We are beginning the process of signing up co-sponsors. We picked up quite a few in 24 hours, but we have a long ways to go.
Syndicated columnist and Fox News contributor Charles Krauthammer says nationalized gay marriage is now inevitable. Do you believe we'll have nationalized gay marriage down the road?
As it stands now, they obviously could not find the fifth vote for that. The liberals on the court, the activists on the court have allowed their personal preferences to overcome any constitutional principles. But I was happy to see in that particular part of the ruling an inability to find a fifth vote to undermine every restriction on marriage across 50 states. I know they had that desire. 4 of them did. Will they head that way next year? They certainly might. They've invited an avalanche of lawsuits, which is exactly what the Obama administration wants to do. They want to short-circuit the democratic process. But as you recall, 40 years ago, the same approach by the left was on the issue of life. We'll get a Supreme Court ruling and it will all be over. That was not the case. We didn't pass a constitutional pro-life amendment, but we've made tremendous progress almost every year since then, promoting life and making some progress in that arena. I hope the same thing can occur on the issues of marriage, and we can move in that direction.
Last question, Representative Huelskamp. After House leadership removed you from key committees and a tug of war between establishment and conservative Republicans, can you give us a temperature check, if you will, on the two factions of the party? And with the rise of Tea Party and conservative PACs now playing a bigger role in elections, is it inevitable that, say, in 2014, 2016, that conservatives will overtake the House?
I don't know whatever is quite inevitable in internal politics in the House. Usually most folks are reelected, and it's hard to make those changes. But since my removal from the committee, from a committee or two committees, and punishment of 3 others, and private punishments for about 20 or 30 of my conservative pro-life colleagues, I think there's been a real backlash, and leadership has had to come to the table and make promises such as we won't bring an immigration bill like the President and Pelosi and Reid want us to do, and we're going to do it the right way. Same thing, there was a farm bill that failed last week because our leadership was not willing to listen to conservatives. Eric Cantor, for example, wanted to expand Obamacare a month ago and thought that was some great strategy. Conservatives, again, killed that. So I think we're slowly getting the message across, mainly because people are getting engaged. They're starting to pick up the phone and say, hey, wait a minute, we elected Republicans and we elected what we thought were conservatives. How come you're not doing that? You run the House. Nancy Pelosi doesn't run the House as much as folks like to complain. It's John Boehner and Eric Cantor, and those are the folks that call the shots. I think we're making progress every day, but again, like Ronald Reagan said, it's trust but verify, whether it's on immigration, whether it's on life issues, whether it's the debt ceiling, whether it's on taxes. And I think a speaker would put himself in a very, very bad position if we went back on his word that he's given us in the last 6 months.
All right, Representative Tim Huelskamp, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.